Good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. So we're just going to allow some time, a minute or so for people to come in. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Hey, Trudy, good to see you. Hey, Anna.
Good morning or whatever evening there.
Evening, morning, somewhere in the world. Good to see you. Emma, good to see you. So if you have a camera available to you, it'll be great to see your faces. Hey, Gloria.
Hey.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah. All right, so make yourself comfortable. Just going to give it some time before we get started. So good to have you all. Okay, there might be some people dropping in later, but we're gonna get started here. So I'm just gonna share my screen. So do you guys see just the presentation or the whole background screen? Yeah. Okay, just give me one moment. And now? Good. All right. Thank you so much, Trudy. Good interaction. All right. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to explore in about, the next hour or so. We're going to explore the secret language of love. So really exciting to share this with you today. And we're going to really be exploring we're going to explore the three most common limiting beliefs around love. So the most common limiting beliefs that I've seen and also that I've read about. So it's quite interesting. So just take notes. Maybe you have a pen and paper with you and you can explore this for yourself and potentially where some of this might be alive for you or not. So just going to keep it really open there. Then we're going to move into some attachment theory content, which is really something I've been diving into, particularly lately over the last 6 months or so. And it's really so much insight and wisdom in that. So we're going to explore that together. Then there will be an opportunity for some open sharing and also some questions if they are alive for you. In between, it's going to be sometimes quite interactive, so you might need to engage a little bit, which is going to be fun. Okay. So a little bit about me, for those that don't know me. So my name is Sarah, and I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. I'm trained in NLP, so that stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, as well as integral framing, and it's integral coaching, and therefore an integral practitioner. And I'm also trained in FBR breathwork facilitation. So those are kind of like the two modalities that I tend to work from. A little bit of the background of me, I've been working in the international modeling industry since the age of 14. And I really believe that that's pretty much the main reason that I've gone into this work, because I've learned so much about resilience, self-leadership, and also there were some challenging times that I really needed to move through, and also therefore courage and authenticity that was really required for me in that kind of world. And I'm really happy to work now with humans intimately for about 5 years now. It's really exciting me. It feels like my life work. And there's so much depth and vulnerability and also strength and willingness that I see every day in these humans. And it just keeps inspiring me, really. And that's why I'm wanting to continue sharing this work, because I love it so much and I keep learning so much from this. And then in this workshop today, we're going to be exploring relationships, right? So I really take my previous relationships and then also the relationship dynamic that Dan and I have been navigating for the last 5 years or so as real reference points for that, and just really my personal experience in that as well as some theory, right? So we're combining some of that and really how this kit continues to be an exploration, which is really lovely and beautiful. That's a little bit about me. Now let's start with like a really open question. So just going to explore here. What does love mean to you? So just sit with that question, potentially feel into your body what arises as you sit with this question. What does love mean to you? And then whenever you're ready, so just take a moment, whenever you're ready, you can type that into the chat if you feel comfortable doing so, just so that I can have a bit of a reference point of what's alive for you guys. And just allowing the question to move through your system. Okay, so we got some beautiful responses coming through. Comfort, ease, intimacy, expansion of a platform for respect and care. Okay. Complete acceptance, beautiful. The connection between two people, body, mind, and soul. Color, joy, trust. Camaraderie, yeah, cool. Presence with all parts of you, met with peace, compassion, love, meeting another in the space where we see them in the same way we see each other. Yeah, cool. Beautiful. So thank you so much for that. And now I'm going to ask another question, which is, what does love really mean to you? Those answers are all very beautiful and very true for you, probably, most likely, I'm assuming. And also, there might be some parts of love that feel slightly uncomfortable or feel difficult in some way, or you feel might feel contraction in your system in some way. So really exploring also that as an inclusion of potentially your definition. And when you're ready, just feeling into that, and when you're ready, bringing that into the chat again, if you're willing to. Love is quite confusing and is different for each person. Same expansion platform for respect and care. Cool. Thank you. Coming home. Acceptance of my being in all angles of life, and thus resonating this to the world around me. Hard conversations. Okay. Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. So this really allows me to just get an insight into your experience and really how you're experiencing this. And also for yourself, as you sit with these questions, how is this landing in your system, and how can you see the different responses from other people? And really this one word love, how it has so many different associations for all of us, which is in and of itself a great insight to see, and just great to learn about yourself and each other, as that how different, but also at the maybe similar that is. Right? And so really we are designed to love. We naturally want to love. We want to love, and we want to be loved. That is like from a very pure innocence. That is what we're designed to do here on this planet. And also what might happen is that we get conditioned from childhood. So we receive all sorts of conditioning that might tell us that love means something in particular. Yeah, and you kind of just spoken to that by sharing your particular idea of what love is in the chat also just now, and for yourself you felt into that. And really we all have quite unique flavors that come to that as well. And so that is what we can call our conditioning around this thing called love, or this quality that we all feel is true. However, we also have our different flavors that we bring to that. And so it's really useful to be aware of that, particularly as we go into intimate relating with someone, maybe an intimate other, that other person most likely and very likely has different definitions and meaning around that, and around what love is to them and what that means to them, and how they want to share that and how they want to feel that. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to go through the 3 most common limiting beliefs around love. And it's really important to mention that these are unconscious for most of us. And so what that means is that we're not consciously aware of that on a certain level of our being. It is somewhere sitting in the background, And so by sharing this, something might come forward that was actually sitting in the back, if you will, in the back, meaning your unconscious. It might actually be an opportunity for that to be seen by you, maybe for the first time. So just allowing the mind to stay open and curious around that. Maybe your first initial inkling is like, no, that's not true for me. And then just sit with it for a little bit longer and feel how that really sits in your system. And maybe it is, and maybe it isn't, right? So just stay open and curious. So the one of a very common limiting belief, whether you are with the opposite gender, so whether you're a female that likes males, a male that likes females, or you're a female that likes a female, or a male that likes a male, or both, beliefs about gender, and then particularly how that is represented in parents, friends, and cultural dynamics, have a big influence on how we experience love with that particular gender. And this also includes beliefs around masculine and feminine energy, which can also be reflected in our own selves. Yeah, so our own relationship with our own masculine and feminine energy. And just for those that aren't familiar with masculine and feminine energies sit within both males and females. And they might represent themselves in different ways in the one person. So beliefs around men and women could sound like men are designed to do more work, men are stronger, men are more powerful, men are more directive. Men like women mainly for sex. These are, I'm mentioning some beliefs that might be alive, yeah. Well, it could be beliefs around men are from a different planet than women. We hear that one often. And then there could be beliefs around women. Women are softer, more nurturing. Or men could be, the beliefs around men could also be that there might be intrusive or harmful in some way, and the opposite could be true for women. And really what is most reflective of how we tend to relate with the opposite gender is how we see our parents relate to one another in the unconscious mind. Yeah, so really going into more unconscious beliefs now. What have you seen in your parents' dynamics? What have you learned from friends that might reflect some beliefs around men and women? So this is really number one, our beliefs around men and women in general. Second, limited, and just feel into these three and which one might be true or which one might not be so true. And maybe a combination of the three is true. Maybe one really particularly stands out. So it could be a combination, could be one in particular, and just feel into what is alive for you as we go through this, right? So the second one, love is a burden. And so on some unconscious level, here the belief is that love is in some way hard work, that it requires responsibility. It requires, maybe difficult conversations. It might be heavy. It is hard work in some way. Yeah. Or there's something from you that is required that is a bit more than just your light usual self, particularly as you interact with your romantic partner, and it feels a bit more heavy. It feels a bit more hard work. It feels a bit more like, you need to show up with responsibility, and that's really important. So any beliefs around love is that's just what some beliefs of that could sound like. It's somewhat, in some way, shape, or form, you've learned or you've received in some way that it requires work from your part, that you need to show up in a particular way, which also means that you can't show up in a particular other way. This burden tends to, because this burden is alive somewhere in the unconscious, if this is alive for you, then there tends to be a fighting for autonomy and freedom. Why? Because love feels like hard work and it feels like a burden. So I don't really necessarily want to feel that. So I'm going to fight for my freedom. And this could also be on a very subtle level alive for you. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a full-on blown burden that's like really obviously there, but just on some subtle level, yeah, it kind of feels like there's some level, some work that's required here, and it kind of feels somewhat heavy. And I would actually like to feel more free and autonomous. So here on this side is a fighting for autonomy, and we're going to go into attachment style in a bit, and we'll see which one this matches with. Now, the third limiting belief is love means abandonment. And really this, on an unconscious level, the belief here is that my partner will leave me at some point or in some way, that my partner in some way doesn't care, or at least not as much as I care, or they just don't care at all. But I care definitely more. So there's some belief around that. And the person that often tends to feel this is someone that feels, can people please a little bit more, just from the sense of like, not because love means abandonment, they don't want the other person to leave. So they're going to mold and shape themselves in particular ways to meet the other person's needs more than their own, potentially. Yeah, there could be a behavior that's alive here. And often this is picked up in childhood in some way, where one of the parents wasn't available or left. Maybe on a young age, maybe a little bit older, but something left, or in previous relationships, someone left, maybe abruptly in some way. So the person can potentially start to believe that love means abandonment. And sometimes only one event like this is required for that belief to start to become alive in some way. And so because this person believes on an unconscious level that love means abandonment, they start to fight for connection and merging. So they really want to merge with the partner, but almost to the point where they lose themselves. Yeah, some level of merging is of course important. We want to meet our partner and connect, but this is really to the like fighting for connection. It's like a fighting quality, right? Like it's almost like when you're not together, there's something wrong or there's something off. So there's a fighting for connection or merging. So take a note for yourself which one of these three beliefs feels most alive for you, or maybe a combination of, or maybe none, which is fine as well. So just really, and be really, of course, honest with yourself as you go through this as much as you can. And just explore that for yourself as we move into this next section here. So this is attachment theory. Who's familiar with attachment theory? Have you guys heard of that before? Trudy, yes, cool. Emma. Yeah, okay. Well, the other person I got, Cass, yeah, cool. So there's some familiarity with this in a group. So I'm just gonna go over the basics really. So attachment styles get formed in really the early years of our relationship with our parents, and between the age of 0 and 3, and then that's where the very basic is laid, and then they get deepened even more between the age of 0 and 7, and then of course any conditioning that comes after just layers on top of that. Yeah. And so in attachment theory, there's 4 attachment styles that they've sort of differentiated. The first one is secure. So that's here on the left-hand side. Secure. What that means is that the person has a positive model of self, so a positive view of themselves, which means they have low anxiety, and they also have a positive view of others, which means they have low avoidance. Yeah. Then there's also here on the right-hand side, there's what they call the anxious attachment style. This person has a negative model of self, so high anxiety, and a positive model of others, so low avoidance. So this person, and this could be on a more subtle level, that this person just tends to put others on somewhat of a pedestal above themselves, even if it's slightly so. Others kind of just know a little bit more. They're a little bit more reliable than myself. They know they're a bit more smart. They're a bit more beautiful. They're a bit more wise. They're a bit more whatever. Yeah. So something about the other is better than me. That's the belief here for the anxious attachment style. Then there's the avoidant attachment style on this side, in which this person has a positive model of self, so there's low anxiety, and tends to have a more negative model of others, so high avoidance. And what this person tends to believe is that they're just slightly better than other people, just a little bit more capable, a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more smart, a little bit more attractive, a bit more, whatever, anything, fill in the blank, right? So they're just a little bit more of something than other people. So they're more independent than the anxious attachment style because they believe they have more capacity within them. Then the anxious attachment style is more orientated towards others, whilst the avoidant attachment style is more orientated towards the self. And then there's the fearful attachment style here, which has a negative model of others, so high avoidance, and a negative model of self, high anxiety. And people that are portraying more of this fearful attachment style have been often raised in really more difficult environments when they were younger, so more abuse and so on, is what you can imagine here. Now, most of the population sits somewhere on the spectrum of avoidant or anxious. So for most of you on this call, you're going to have some quality of either avoidant or anxious in your system. And
can there be a mix of it?
Yeah, that can also be true. Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking for, like, obviously this is very much differentiated in 4 categories, if you will, like 4 styles. And that is, you can see that as very black and white, but it's very nuanced. Like you can almost place yourself as a little dot somewhere here or here or here, and you can sort of see which qualities of each. And we're going to explore these qualities deeper so that it becomes more clear as we go through this workshop, which parts or which qualities are alive in your system. And then as you do that, if you have a romantic partner, you could look at what's their style, right? Or what's their particular qualities that are alive in them, and you get to explore that for yourself, both for yourself and for your partner, which can be really useful. But yeah, definitely Gloria. So there can be a combination of things going on at the same time. And most of the population is fairly secure, but has some level of avoidant and anxious. That's really, really common. Yeah. Not to the point where it really diminishes their quality of life, but it influences their romantic relationships to a degree. Yeah. And that degree depends on, again, the degree to which we move into these areas. So because that is the most common dynamic of either having more of an avoidant or more of an anxious attachment style, in this particular slide, I want to explore particularly the relationship between the anxious and the avoidant attachment style. This tends to be the most common pairing that tends to happen in society. And the reason for this is because the anxious attachment style is more of the pursuer. So it's the one that tends to pursue their partner, whilst the avoidant attachment style tends to withdraw. And this is extra attractive for the pursuer because the pursuer wants to pursue something that unconsciously they pursue something that they believe they're going to leave. That person is going to leave them on an unconscious level, even though on a conscious level, they of course wouldn't want that because that doesn't make any sense. But on an unconscious level, they seek what they also don't actually want to feel. And that goes for all of us. Yeah, so the anxious attachment style tends to pursue, whilst the avoidant attachment style tends to withdraw. And that comes back to the earlier beliefs that we touched on, which is the second belief was around love as a burden, which tends to be more related to the avoidant attachment style, as in the avoidant attachment style person has that unconscious belief in some way that love is a burden, whilst the anxious attachment style has more of an unconscious belief around they will leave me, or that person will be I'll be left alone, I will be abandoned. So the way that this couple tends to cope with this this is on a somewhat conscious level. The anxious person starts to criticize the avoidant person. And criticism can look in all sorts of ways, right? So it just starts to become over-occupied, if you will, with the behavior or the way or the traits or the qualities of their partner, of their avoidant partner. And that can also actually sometimes be like criticism. Like there's an actual quality of judging and criticism going on. And it's because the anxious is looking for faults because it doesn't want to be abandoned. So it's looking for that in their partner. Ultimately to not have to feel that, of course, to not have to deal with that. But that is the lens that they look through. This is the lens that we look through, and we're not always aware of this lens. Now, the avoidant that doesn't want to feel that criticism starts to defend themselves. So there's a defensive strategy that comes in, and this is somewhat conscious, and this is particularly when conflict starts to escalate, quote unquote. This is the cycle that this kind of couple tends to be stuck in. And then because there's more defensiveness, the anxious starts to more criticize, and then there's more defensiveness and more criticism, more defensiveness, and this is the cycle, right? And there you go. And so this is actually a stonewalling that starts to happen. So there's more and more disconnect that starts to happen because we don't actually relate with our partner anymore. We're probably relating to one of our parents. We're actually often relating with one of our parents in our romantic relationships, which is very fascinating. And so we actually lose intimacy and connection in this dynamic as this starts to happen. And the threat can be really subtle. So the threat can be recognized in tone, facial, or posture. It doesn't have to be through words either. But sometimes that it can just be this quality of criticism in how someone looks. And eye contact is very important in that. Or this quality of withdrawing or defending, how someone voices their words, the tone of it, or the posture. So some of this is so deeply ingrained in the system that it's not necessarily through only language as such only. It's so much more. It's the whole system that starts to get engaged. And so this is where a lot of couples find themselves in these loops because they don't know what it is exactly, but they're just kind of stuck in this. Now, as we then move further and we actually move into more of the unconscious that is alive in this particular dynamic. So you see that same dynamic here, and we move more into the unconscious, which is about 75 to 80% sits in the unconscious. We start to see the beliefs that are underneath this on either side, and we start to see how we can actually deepen our intimacy. So again, we're going to start with the anxious. So the anxious might have, when they ask their partner for something, hey, can you do X, Y? Can you do the dishes for me tonight? Whatever. And their partner might say, no, I don't really feel like doing that, which is a fine answer sometimes, right? Sometimes you just don't want to, or you don't have the time or whatever. And then the anxious on an unconscious level starts to feel like they're not important, they're not a priority. But if we go deeper, their actual fears of rejection and abandonment. But this is not a conscious belief that they hold in their mind as such. It's felt in the body. And the first emotion that starts to come alive is fear. Fear, like I will be abandoned. That's like a fearful experience. So there's fear in the system that starts to come alive. So this is the first emotion. The secondary emotion is anxiety, frustration, and anger. So the anxious attachment styles tends to respond to this fear more from a place of anger than from a place of fear often. So the anxious attachment can be quite outwardly angry because they're more outward in their expression. So they can be outwardly angry, even though they're also people pleasing. And so there's this under and over expression that can happen there. And really it's this belief that they're not important. So all of this is happening underneath the surface, if you will. Underneath the surface of superficial conflict, this is what's happening for this person. That tends to lead more towards the anxious side, yeah? So we're talking generally speaking now, yeah? But these are very common dynamics. Then on this side, so we have the avoidant and who tends to withdraw. When their partner starts to criticize them, or at least they perceive it as criticism, their belief, their unconscious belief is that I'm not getting it right, I'm doing something wrong. Now that is directly touching into their self-worth, which is probably their core fear, which is for the anxious, the core fear is abandonment, while for the avoidant, the core fear is self-worth, that they're not worthy enough, which also represents itself in body rather than it's not this word, right? It's a quality in the body that starts to emerge. An unconscious belief that really represents itself in a body, which represents itself first as a primary emotion, as a fear again. So there's some sort of shutdown, which is the secondary emotion, but the fear is the first one. So there's fear, and then the way they cope with that is through shutdown. And so they withdraw, they shut down and withdraw from the conversation. And then the anxious avoidant wants more of that connection and gets angry. And so you have one person that gets angry, the other person shuts down. And that's just, you just have so much conflict when you stay on this superficial level, like on this more high level. But the moment we go into these deeper conversations, so we actually have conversations of, hey, when you say you don't want to do the dishes, I have this fear coming up of abandonment. And I know it's totally irrational and I know it's totally inappropriate, but that's just what's going on for me. And you can only speak to that if you're aware of it, right? And most people aren't, which is the beauty of this model, really. And on the other side, hey, if you say to me what I could have done differently, so quote unquote criticism, which might sometimes be criticism, but sometimes might just be advice or just an opinion or idea, which is of course welcome and fine. But hey, when you say that to me, I feel a sense of lack of self-worth in myself. Is it possible to check in with me first before you say something? Is it possible to word it in a different way, or to ask me a question if I want to receive that in that moment? And now there's a conversation about the actual fear. And so now there's actually a deepening of intimacy and connection, as opposed to a stonewalling that happens more on this level. So the more we can get in touch with our own bodily sensation, our own fears, the more we can actually then deepen our connection and really understand the secret language of love in this case. So even though on a conscious level, we all might have certain beliefs around love that we shared before in the chat, right? Certain ideas of what we think love is. And on an unconscious level, that is all true, and that's still true. But there might also be real parts that are really about, well, love actually means that I'm getting my needs met around self-worth. And I'm getting that through my partner as opposed to through myself. Or I'm getting my needs met in terms of my fear of abandonment, and I'm getting that through my partner as opposed to really trusting my own self. And of course, when we get something through the other person, it's a one-way street to misery, really, because we're trying to get our needs met through the other person. And so for any healthy functioning relationship, I would say it's really important for both individuals to be fairly independent, in the sense of they get their needs met through their own selves. And then they get to connect with a sense of wholeness. So this is really about wholeness in oneself first. So the path of healing and growth for both the anxious and the avoidant attachment style, and maybe, Gloria, as you were speaking into, maybe some qualities of both might be alive. So some of this might be relevant on both sides for you or for some other people on the call, is really to look into some of these elements here. So I'll walk us through it. So the path of growth and healing for the anxious attachment style would be, or the person that leans more towards that, would be talk about abandonment wound and fear of rejection. So just have a real open conversation about that. This is what's going on for me. And that might be scary, right, to begin with, but that's really what's here for me. And I really want to connect with you more. And yeah, I have a fear of being left out or left behind or left alone. The unconscious desire, funnily enough, for the more towards the anxious attachment style is to be more self-reliant and free. So to be actually more independent, because they feel like if the anxious can really start to feel like I'm powerful in my own self and I don't need to get my needs met through the other so much, I'm self-reliant, I'm free. So that's their unconscious desire, actually, even though on the surface they want to connect and merge. But underneath the surface, they want to be more independent. And so another really important quality to practice for this person is healthy boundaries. Just really clear, healthy boundaries. Yes, no, really clear. Practicing self-regulation in terms of internal self-regulation, because the anxious avoidance style tends to regulate more through co-regulation. So with their partner, it's really important for this person to come back to self-regulation as well. So to regulate by themselves on the couch and just be really fine in that place and be able to do that. Because earlier on in their earlier life, they tended to regulate through their parents more and with their parent more. And of course, we all need that to some degree. But if we overly do that to the point where we can't self-regulate for our own selves, then we become super reliant on other people, which is not healthy if it's too much. Yeah, so they need to move more internal. And then also not trying to control or criticize their partner, which has to do with healthy responsibility. So again, it has to do about drawing the energy inward and being really clear about your own power, your own desire, your own yeses and your nos, and not necessarily needing the other person to be different or be there for you in a particular way because you just are okay with yourself. And this really has to do with healthy responsibility and not crossing the responsibility line. What we call it is to become over involved in what other people think, feel, say, and do. We're not responsible for what other people think, will feel, say, and do. We're only responsible for what we think, feel, say, and do. So coming into healthy responsibility. And then also focus on your own purpose, desires, and goals in life. It's really important that we have some quality of what do I actually want in my life? What are my desires and goals? And really focusing on that and relying on your internal reality to tell you that. And then to receive. So the anxious tends to give more. So really about receiving. Now, on the other side, we're going to go to the avoidant. The path of growth and healing is to talk about your fear of not feeling good enough and potentially low self-esteem, maybe in certain contexts or in certain situations or with certain people. How are you feeling? Your self-worth is being challenged. The unconscious desire is for this person is to feel worthy through themselves. So not through external validation, whether that's through your partner, whether that's through social media, whether that's through your parents, friends, family members, your boss, whatever, right? So just really coming into a sense of worth through your own self. And maybe some people use their children for that, right? So that's not good. So we want to resource that through our own selves. And then for this avoidant attachment style, because they're more withdrawing and a bit more cocooning in themselves and a bit more shut down, their nervous system tends to go more into a shutdown. We want to really, this person is really served by being more receptive to the environment, being more open and receptive to other people and to the environment. So coming out of their own cocoon and coming more into the space of the other, if you will, or just the environment. And so in that same way, practicing co-regulation a little bit more. So a bit more with your partner co-regulating as opposed to always retreating towards yourself, because that's what the avoidant tends to do. They go more in their own cocoon and just regulate with their own selves because that's how they've learned to do that in their childhood. So that's really healthy. And we want to all be able to do that to some degree. And also, can I sometimes regulate with my partner there? And can I be in that space of co-regulation as well? And we will all want a beautiful blend of both, of self-regulation and co-regulation. And then for this person also understand how your behavior is influencing others. And this really has to do with empathy. So the avoidant is sometimes called also the dismissive avoidant. That's another name for it. And the reason for it is because it tends to kind of just dismiss emotions, both within themselves and then in other people. It's like, oh, you feel that, but whatever, like just get over it kind of thing. Like might not be that obvious and blunt the way that's being worded just now, but that might be their internal landscape of like, just dismiss the emotion or just kind of like, just whatever, what's the big deal? Yeah, so really, really more understanding also how your behavior is influencing others and this real like loving empathy that can come alive here as the healing starts to emerge for this more avoidant attachment style. And then also, again, it has to do with coming out of your cocoon, supporting others in their goals and desires. So this person tends to be more associated towards my own goals and desires and how can I accomplish my own goals and desires. And so what will be the path of healing for this person is to also support other people in their goals and desires. And in that sense, also to give a little bit more. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is all general. Yeah. And again, like you might find some qualities in yourself that lean more towards one side or the other. And you might find some qualities in your partner that lean more towards one side or the other. And also when you have children, you can really potentially start to see these dynamics already coming alive from a very young age, because this is shaped in a very, very, sometimes real unconscious way from a very, very young age. And again, most of us have some quality of either the anxious or the avoidant in ourselves. So you might find it's very strong, you might find it's very subtle for you, and just keep exploring and be open as to what's here for you. And so a little question here that really relates to what I said earlier, which is, what do you think you're getting through your through the relationship or your partner that you don't believe you have already yourself? That could be love, that could be appreciation, that could be security, that could be respect, that could be value, that could be safety, that could be financial means, money, literally. There could be a sense of grounding and holding, or it could be a sense of playful dynamic. Like, what is it in your relationship that you don't feel like you have by yourself, or in your partner? And you don't have to share that per se in the chat unless you feel moved to. And this is really just an inquiry for yourself. I'm just getting curious, how is this potentially alive for you? Because this also really leads to the second question that's here, is where in your relationship do you feel like you don't have a choice? And the reason that question is worded in that way is because if we feel like some of our most important needs are met through our partner or through the relationship, we don't feel like we have a choice, actually. And choice really looks and sounds a bit like this. Every morning, I'm choosing to be in this relationship. And I'm genuinely free to choose. I can also leave if that's what I desire to do so. And that is actually intimacy and connection, because we're not in just some habituated, I'm here because I'm kind of decided that 10 years ago when we got married and now I'm here. No, I'm really here because I'm choosing to be here. And there's nothing in me that feels like it needs to be here for any sense of security, safety, control, self-worth, value, intimacy. And there's certain things we get through the relationship, but we would also be fine by ourselves. That's basically the essence of what we're exploring here. Like, and by fine, I mean like a thriving, healthy human being. And that is really contentment. So we're in our relation, contentment in the sense of, I just feel content in my own self, whether I'm with my partner or not. And then we're really more looking towards that secure attachment style, which most of us in some way, shape, or form aren't fully. Yeah, we might be 90% in sort of secure, but there might be 10% in either the anxious or the avoidant, or a combination of both. Or we might feel like we're really, really quite strong in the avoidant or the anxious, or stronger in both. And so that's really useful information. And so where in your relationship do you feel like you don't have a choice? Like you just genuinely feel like you don't have a choice around that. You can't just say no, or you can't just do your own thing, or you can't just be intimate sometimes when that's appropriate in that situation. And you just feel like you can't do that. Like you don't have a choice. It's really difficult for your system to, or you can't just not get angry. Like it's just, it's almost like your system doesn't know another pathway that's available. Because what we're looking at is flexibility in both mind, body, and nervous system, and breath as well. But we're really looking at how flexible is the system to be able to have different choices available. If I feel like I have different choices available in my system, I feel free, generally speaking, right? Yeah. Because I feel like I'm here by choice. I can move, I can do this, I can do that, I can be intimate, but I can also do my own thing. And I feel really comfortable in all of those spaces. And just where on that spectrum do you find yourself potentially? So just allow a minute or so for you to just explore this for yourself, whether you want to do that in more of an inquiry through just feeling into the body and what's alive right now as this comes up, or whether you want to write that down in a journal and just explore this for yourself. We're just going to give it a minute or so. We're going to gently move into some questions as well. If they come up, feel free to ask a question here, to unmute and ask a question. Or if you feel like you want to share something, potentially some insight or some realizations you've had recently or through this workshop that feel particularly relevant either for yourself or for other people in the school. So welcoming that in now. Thank you, Celeste. Bye. Have a good day, evening.
I would like to bring something in. That's okay.
Yes.
I can recognize a massive people-pleasing element right the way back from childhood, and I understand where a lot of that comes from. And now it's very subtle, but it's still there. And I recognize it in relationship with even a friend, of potentially saying even just sometimes it pops up and it's a wording of a message to someone. And what you said today about is that about then my control element of trying to control the other's thoughts, feelings, response. And then is that linked to abandonment? Yeah, I'm just asking for some clarity on that one.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, potentially, right? So it could be. So it sounds, so when you send a message to a friend, what is running through mind as you do that, and potentially through body as well as a sensation? But what's the tends to be a story that comes through mind if you send a, maybe you send a more direct message, and it's like, this is a bit more direct, and what tends to happen if you do that? Is there a fear
Potentially
response?
free, yeah, fear response in certain friendships. Yeah, that the body a tensing, a freezing, yeah, and then a start a blocking of words.
And then, okay, so thank you. So that's really, really beautiful and useful. So, and then what tends to happen? What's the fear on behalf of? Like, what is it trying to communicate with you? Is it a fear of loss of your own freedom, or is it more a fear of like they won't like you? They might dislike you in some way, shape, or form.
The second one, the not being received in the way that I want to be received.
Yeah, cool. So we can call it the fear of rejection or the fear of abandonment, which are quite strong words, yeah, but there's some quality of that in there, right? And you were already speaking into that, so I feel like there's some awareness there. Just that you won't be received, or that you won't be welcomed in the way that you want to, or that you mean to. Maybe a fear of misunderstanding as well.
Yeah.
And maybe that was a common pattern in childhood where you wanted to communicate something or express something in particular, and it was simply not received in the way that you meant, and there was a misunderstanding. And then really, what's really useful is to really trace back some of the things that would happen in relationship with our parents, and how that is potentially showing up in other relationships, because it most likely is. We kind of see the world, I find this a funny lens, we kind of see the world through like we see our mom and our dad everywhere. This is kind of like the lenses that we look through. So we kind of project our own experiences of our parents onto other people, and that's how we tend to see and perceive other people. And then potentially the first belief that I spoke in today is men and women, and some overarching themes can come through there. But yeah, when you interact with your friends, really start to, which parent does that feel like? Sometimes you can really know which parent that is, what kind of type of interaction that is with which parent that was like that, like there's a similar essence or quality alive with that parent, and then trace back how you would adjust yourself or behave differently than what you would otherwise authentically or just naturally would, and how, and because those are your strategies, then you're getting to know your strategies. And maybe that is for you, Emma, it sounds like there's some quality of potentially overthinking how the other might be receiving you. Are you saying the right thing? Is it not being misunderstood on behalf of a fear of rejection? And so really getting in touch with that fear of rejection is like number one thing that will facilitate difference for you. And then also, what are the strategies you're using to avoid that as much as possible? Because obviously no one wants to feel that, right? No one wants to feel the fear of rejection. So we built all these strategies around us to avoid us from actually feeling that. So the most direct way is to feel the fear of rejection just fully and directly. And we can explore that another time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, Jana, yeah.
Hello. It's just what I've observed, if I may, with the three common beliefs. It's mainly about men and women. That part came through, and with the attachment theory, when I was looking at it and thinking, I was more in the negative of self and the anxiety part. However, when you then went deeper into the theory, when you were talking about the path of growth and healing, it's just, I found patterns in both, almost on equal measures. That's quite interesting. And so it's probably then knowing myself, and as you just were describing to Emma, seeing when we are with somebody, say friends, relationship or whatever, which part of my parent is coming through, and knowing how to, that's brilliant. Like to be so self-aware, to be in, yeah.
Sharing that. Yeah, so good. So because this is the most common dynamic that tends to happen in a lot of relationship, the anxious with the avoidance, some quality of that, and to various degrees. Yeah, so there's more nuance. There's more nuance. That is also tends to be, our parents tends to be more leaning towards one or the other. So we tend to have one parent that is more on the avoidance spectrum and one parent that's more on the anxious spectrum. So of course, I'm learning from both of those, and depending on my quality of interaction with each parent, maybe one parent was way more present with me, and because it was just kind of like the primary caregiver. In my case, it was my mom. My dad was working a lot, even though I have a relationship with my dad, but just in general, I spend more time with my mom. So I tend to have more relationship than with my dad, right? So and we just have all of these nuances that we can work with. But yeah, we do strategize our own, we internalize some of the patterns that's their conditioning, that which they have internalized from their parents, right? So this is like generational stuff, and we internalize that and then make that our own, and that's where we tend to feel stuck. Yeah, it's if I feel some sort of sense of I don't really feel like a fear of intimacy or a fear of fear of potentially speaking up or something arising in myself, but I can kind of see it and then still lean in, I have choice and I have freedom in my system, even though I might feel that arise. Where I'm stuck is where I don't have an option to operate in a different way. I'm just in this people pleasing mode, for example, then I don't have choice in my system. And a part of this is really that we can discover in conversation, and a part of it is also has to do with like the nervous system actually needs to start feeling safe and potentially more receptive or a bit more contained, depending on what's there, right? So there's so many nuances that we can work with here. But yeah, like to your point, right, there can be different qualities in yourself that you can recognize from both the qualities of your parents that in some way have been differently internalized. There tends to be most people, just that tends to be the case. There tends to be one of the two limiting beliefs tends to be like way more strong than the other. It tends to be the real fear of rejection or abandonment, or the real sense of self-worth. And it tends to be that one of the two is more strong than the other, but you might find that they're both quite alive, and then you can explore that. This is why, yeah, it's very nuanced and individualized, of course, like it's very different per person. So yeah.
I want to leave some space for others, but just wanted to ask, with this knowing now, how does one can work on themselves? Because most of these things would come across to me when I'm in a contact with somebody, being it friend, parent relationship, finding about myself, how I'm reacting, which is it, how, and not feeling uncomfortable when, as I start getting know myself more, the healing my nervous system, getting more correct, let's say. Imagine that I'm speaking to you and I find myself that I'm doing something what I want to heal or correct or whatever, and I stop, and the person will be looking at me like, what's up? Why are you stopping? But it's because I'm feeling what's happening and I want to regulate it. Or
So
how would you?
I mean, the first piece for all of this is awareness. And like self-awareness, right? Are we even aware? Like, we can't possibly work with something that we're not really aware of. That's really difficult, right? So just by having attended this workshop and being exposed to this kind of information, you can start to explore more online on attachment theory. There's a whole module in our conscious leadership framework that's specifically dedicated to relationships, and also and just the whole series is about understanding oneself better. So that might be something you want to explore. You might want to engage a coach or practitioner that you can talk about this to really get deeper, because you're probably not going to do that in a single conversation with a friend, for example, and you pause. But however, what you're speaking to is where you can apply that in life. You can simply, the way to work with it is simply to communicate to the person, hey, I'm doing this practice where I'm starting to feel into myself how I respond to relationships. I'm just going to take a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? And then you take a moment. So you just let the other know what you're doing, and then you take your moment.
That's it's great to be able to do that, have that self-awareness, and not courage, perhaps even courage. To say that, isn't it, rather than withhold.
So potentially in this conversation, there's some clarity emerging for you around a pattern in relationship. Actually, you want to feel something in yourself, but you feel afraid to communicate that to the person because whatever the person might think of that, or whatever the narrative is there, right? But so for me, a healthy relationship is also being really clear in your communication, being open and receptive, and being clear. It's like, this is so that the other person knows, because the other person don't know what's going on for you. They can't read your mind, right? So if we don't communicate, they don't know what's going on, right? But if we just really clearly communicate, hey, I'm just going to take a moment to feel into myself here because I'm doing this new thing of understanding myself better, or however you frame that. And then they know, and they're like, okay, sweet, enjoy. I'm just gonna sit here for 5 minutes, and then you come back, and then you're together again. And so what I'm hearing, that is a pattern, potentially a pattern for you to explore, which is around just stating your needs really clearly to the people that you're relating with.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And I hope I didn't take too much time.
Oh, no, thank you so much for the question. Yeah. Cass, you raise your hand.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I definitely relate to both the anxious and avoidant styles, and something I guess I find very confusing and conflicting is like looking at the different lists and going, okay, I am like this in this list, and I'm also the complete opposite in that list. And I can't remember what it was exactly. But I guess it also creates frustration within me because like, oh, well, I don't know how to fix that, because in one way I can try to work towards fixing one of these things, but it just sort of flips me into that opposite kind of space. So I might be doing it, I want to say there's an avoidant headspace and there's an anxious headspace. And sometimes I'm not even aware that I'm in those, but it's like once I step out of those, eventually, then I'm able to go, okay, I was in that, but I didn't realize that at the time. And I'm still like, it's still such a work in progress and hard to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, also very frustrating at the same time when you want to better yourself, but you can't see the way forward as well.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that and just wording that. Really appreciate that. So first of all, this is a work in progress for all of us, including for myself. Like I'm like half of the time I don't see my own patterns, and I'm kind of just okay with. I've just become really okay with that. It's like, yeah, I'm probably fucked half of the time, but whatever. So that's just this radical acceptance of what's here. So let's first just invite that in, right? Like just we don't know what we don't know, and we do our best, and let's just work with that assumption that you do your very best, that you do the best that you can, and so is everyone else. Yeah. And then with that, let's get curious. Let's like play and let's get curious. None of this is really serious in that sense. It's really beautiful, and it can show us a lot of truth about ourselves, but it's not heavy or serious per se, right? So let's just get curious. And then you might find that, yeah, sometimes you notice this flip is what I'm hearing. Yeah. So you notice a flip from one side to the other. Yeah. So
yeah,
that can potentially feel quite disbalancing. Would that be a way to describe it? Or just confusing in a lot that sometimes you're here and then that and then that, and just there's no clarity in your system kind of thing, or just harmony overall?
And even that, it might be like, oh right, I'll work towards maybe bettering myself in this area, but then it doesn't really better myself. It just makes me go to the other way of thinking or being.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing in your question is kind of this potential fear, or what may arise is that as you work on this quality, it might actually deepen on the other end, and you don't want that to happen because you don't want to fall too deep into that side either. You want it to be some sort of harmonized.
Yeah, trying to find what secure is, and yeah, the path to being in that space.
So if I just bring up my slides again here, let me have a look. So if we just go here, you might find yourself a little bit more in this space, Cassandra. So a little bit more on both of each side. So you sometimes a negative view of self, and then also a negative view of others, which might mean that there's a little bit of both going on, which is so good to know. And then the path of healing for you would be to implement both of these sides. So set healthy boundaries and stay open and reciprocal.
Yeah.
If receive and give. Focus on your own purpose, desires, and goals, and support others doing the same.
Mm.
Healthy responsibility. So not being over responsible for others, but also not under. Unconscious to be more self-reliant and also feel your worth through your own self. And this is again, this is like true for every human being, because this is more represent, if we embody both sides of these qualities, we embody naturally more of a secure attachment style, which is a person that just feels quite good in themselves, because they feel good in themselves, they have a good relationship with others, and it's fairly easy in that space. Yeah. Most of us don't, right? To some degree, most of us have some level of this going on. So depending on the degree to which this is going on, it's also depending on the degree you might need to integrate some of these parts. And if we look at it as polarity integration, or like two parts of the whole, you want to look at both at the same time. And what that might mean is okay, what feels from this list, what feels really important and alive for you right now? It might mean, I'm just mentioning an example, it's really about setting healthy boundaries for yourself now. Okay, well, just choose one and just practice that for a while. And how does it start to feel in your system? And then once you feel like you really have that dialed in quite well, and it might literally take 6 months, right? It took me 6 months to really understand this and to work with my own patterns in this in a more useful way, at the very least. And I'm still learning, right? So, but to say, like, it took me 6 months to really work through some of this deeper stuff. So you might work on that for 6 months, and then you might also, okay, I've got some really solid, healthy boundaries now. That feels really good. I feel really clear in that. And then also, I'd like a little bit more receptivity, and like a little bit more people around me, and a little bit more fluidity within that. So let's invite that in a little bit. And so you just start to layer with some of this. You don't do everything at once, because that's way too much. Obviously, no one can do that. So you just start to explore in layers. Okay, what do you feel from anything that's here on this page? What feels most relevant for you right now? Just choose one and start there. You'll receive the recording of this session, so you can come back to this, and then you can look at this list again and see what next, right? And you just start exploring that. And I do really want to speak to there's no such thing as fixing or bettering oneself. You're already whole. You can't become more whole.
Thank you. I forget that one.
Yeah,
Yes.
like, it just doesn't actually exist. You already are beautifully and loving and perfect as you are. There's nothing you need to improve or change about yourself at all.
Thank you.
And all we're doing here is we're just getting to know these parts of ourselves a little bit better, so that we can just kind of work with them a little bit better. But it's not about fixing at all. That's not what we're doing here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that support you?
It does. Yeah. That feels good. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
And thank you for receiving.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else that might be alive? We're just slightly over 8 minutes, so if you need to go, feel free to do so. And otherwise, we're going to close it off if there's nothing here. Thank you, Trudy. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to close it off. So thank you all for being here, for staying till the end. And
Thanks, Sarah.
I hope it was useful and insightful. And if you have any questions for me or for us with Yes And, we're here to support you and help you through these processes. So there's several opportunities that you can engage with us with. One of them is reach out to me personally for more individualized conversations like this, like just inquiry conversations about relationship, but also just about increasing your own self-awareness, which has a lot to do with mind somatic awareness. So bringing the mind and the soma together. And then also we have our conscious leadership framework, which the next group will start in January. And a big part of that has to do with relationships, and also the whole module is designed really around self-awareness, embodied awareness, and how do you lead yourself with more confidence, ease, and freedom and impact in your life. And so that is also available. So there will be an email sent out with that if you're interested in any of that. And otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Have a beautiful evening, beautiful day. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.